Hello YouTube. I wanted to do a quick video on, hopefully it'll be quick, on definitions, um, because I think it's an important subject, and I think that it's something that there's like a plague of misunderstandings about on YouTube. Uh, particularly when people get into like debate mode, right? Now, when you go into the mode of debating something, then it's necessary to define your terms, right? But if we're just plucking out terms from the world apart from that context, then we have um, the issue of meaning becomes much more complex, right? And so the thesis that I want to advance is that the meaning of a given term does not reduce to its definition, right? Um, when we use terms in speech and when they appear in different places, things get much more complex, right? Um, so when we're talking about the meaning of a word, if we pick a word like atheism, right, or if we pick another word like terrorism, um, when we use these terms, um, it might not be proper to simply go to the dictionary and look at that, right? This isn't the best place. This isn't the most solid foundation to build up a case from, right? Um, if it were, for instance, if meaning were truly reducible to definitions, then the field of linguistics would be kind of useless, right? Um, so there are at least three dimensions, three axes, I think, um, that are more or less commonly understood um, to contribute to the meaning of a term, right? And in some way, we're not asking the question what this term means, right? We're asking the question how this term means. And I think most theories of meanings fall somewhere. If you could imagine like an XYZ axis, most theories of meaning fall somewhere on that X, Y, and Z. The three contributing factors. First is what linguists and what linguists refer to as the synchronic structure of a sign. This becomes exceptionally important in what's called structuralism. Um, Structuralism is heavily emphasizes um, the synchronic structure of a word, right? So what the synchronic structure means is that when you use a word, you have this present word, either a sound or something written down, and that word means because it invokes all of these absent words, right? So you could take the word marriage. It's a classic example. The word marriage means because it's related to all these other terms, like husband, like wife, like family, like child, contract. The phrase "I do," right? Now, all of these different signifiers stand in a certain relationship to the word marriage, and it's that set of relationships that determines what this word means. Right? That's the idea of the synchronic structure of a word. So we look at synonyms, we look at antonyms, we look at the words that would be entailed in the definition, and all these different things that constitute the word. Another space that contributes that may contribute to how meaning is formed is in what's called the diachronic structure. Diachronic meaning essentially over time, right? Synchronic means at the same time, diachronic over time. So the idea is that every word that we use has a history. And if you think of, so basically every use of a term in history, in every place that it's been written, every place that it's been misused, in every joke that it's a part of, in every double entendre that it's a part of, in every etc., 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 over the course of history has shaped and colored the use of the word, right? So the idea is that you have this definition, but the definition leaves out most of the meaning, right? The meaning of the term is conveyed from possibly the synchronic, possibly the diachronic. Then the third axis is tied to what's called ordinary language philosophy, tied to the late Wittgenstein and later J.L. Austin, which is the usage of a term. So how the word is effectively used is what's important here, right? So it's not the important thing is that when I say a lighter, right? It's not that, or in no case actually, is the meaning of the word lighter determined by the fact that I have a picture of a lighter in my head. This is what Wittgenstein calls the Augustinian view of language. And it's also the view that he advances in the Tractatus, more or less. It's not the case that I have a lighter and there's a picture of a lighter in my head that corresponds to the lighter, and that's how, words gather their meaning. In the same way, it's not like I use the word lighter and it attaches to a definition, and that's how the word gets its meaning, either. Right, so if we really want to talk seriously about what any particular term means, like the word terrorism, for instance, one way to go about it is, and you see this is what makes, for instance, Derrida so hard to read. If you spend any time with Derrida's philosophy, it's damn near impenetrable at times. And the reason why is because he's trying to, and failing to, self-admittedly, right, failing at taking a word and giving an account of the history of that term, as well as the relationships that word stands in at any given moment, right? So what meaning is, then, for Derrida, who's a particularly interesting philosopher of language, I think, what meaning is something that's sort of uncontrollable and generative and unwieldy and impossible to really give an account of. But if you want a clearer, but that doesn't mean that we can't get a clearer picture of what the word means and how the word means and how the word has acquired this quality that we call meaning. So we take a word like terrorism, and we take, terrorism has an official definition put out by the U.S. government. But, an antecedent to that might be the idea of the French Terror in the French Revolution, right? And you can go back this way, and you can do this diachronic analysis and show the history and how the word shaped itself over time. You can also place the word in a synchronic structure, right? So you could point out specific examples of terrorism, specific places in our discourse where we use the word terrorism and what that applies to. You can also point to other terms that might be meaningful, like suicide bomber, or car bomber, or sniper, or maybe assassin would be in there. So these politics, ideology, like these words would come along. When you say the word terrorism, all of these words come along with it, and also the history of the word comes along with it, and the structures within which that term emerges, and also how that how this synchronic and diachronic structures of the absent signs within the synchronic structure itself and the various iterations thereof. So you end up with this really unwieldy thing. So meaning becomes very difficult. So when we talk about a term atheism, for instance, it's one thing to talk about the definition of that term, and you could talk about that. And if you get into a debate or a conversation, you might want to clarify precisely what you mean, and you might want to try and reduce it to a definition. You might want to try and make that move. That can be a useful move, but it doesn't actually. But the moment you do that, you're taking it out of its context, and you're removing it from the richness of its meaning. You're evacuating the term of everything that comes with it, all this baggage that comes with the term. And it seems like the constant, incessant appeal to definitions, it's almost pathological in a certain way. Going to, Webster's dictionary says that this means this, and therefore, this word is, whatever. But that just effectively isn't a proper way of going about understanding what a word means. That's not how a linguist goes about understanding how a word effectively means. Furthermore, it's you have to bring about the question of how are definitions written, right? And they're written more or less on these kinds of bases, right? So in some way, a definition could be said to be, linguistics for dummies or something, right? So this is why I get really prickly, I guess, when somebody gives some really simplistic, this is a definition, and therefore you're wrong in talking about the meaning of the term in excess of that definition. I think that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how language works and what language is, and how we can talk about language and talk about terms, and talk about terms that work or don't work, talk about what terms signify, talk about blah, 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 blah. You can go off on whole really interesting conversations. You could probably write a whole text on the history of one word. In fact, it's been done. A lot of what Derrida does is based on this idea. So he famously takes the word pharmakon, where we get the word pharmacy, which means both cure and poison. And elaborates that out into this whole crazy improvisational kind of unwieldy text. It's very beautiful stuff. I would definitely recommend Derrida, and I'm sure a lot of the more analytically minded people who surely hate someone like Derrida could give other names of people. Wittgenstein is another really important one. So yeah, I just wanted to do that video talking about meaning and definitions, because it's a real, I think it's a real blight on the minds of the community. I don't think that people, think people understand how restrictive it is to thought to practice this kind of discourse. That's my opinion on it, at least, anyway. And thank you very much, and have a good day.